Montana Territory, 1878. The small settlement of Cottonwood Creek clung to existence on the rugged frontier, where the unforgiving land tested even the strongest souls. Spring had just begun to whisper across the plains, but Beatrice Larson had long stopped believing in new beginnings. At 21, her mirror reflected a beauty she couldn't see, golden hair cascading down her back, eyes the color of summer sky, and a figure that turned heads despite the modest blue calico dress she wore. But Beatrice lived by a simple truth. Beauty was worthless on the frontier. Only strength mattered, and she had learned that lesson too well. "You're wasting away out here," her father had told her before consumption claimed him last winter. "A woman alone might as well be a ghost." Those words haunted her as she struggled to maintain their small homestead, convinced that independence was her only salvation. The frontier had taught her that depending on others only led to devastation when they inevitably disappeared, either by choice or by the cruel hand of fate. Beatrice watched as married women in Cottonwood Creek aged before their time, burdened by childbearing and labor. She observed how widows were treated, with pity at best, predatory interest at worst. She had decided long ago that she would rather face the wilderness alone than risk her heart in a world where death lurked around every corner. The spring auction was Cottonwood Creek's largest gathering of the season. Beatrice attended only out of necessity, needing to sell her handcrafted quilts to purchase seeds and supplies. She kept to herself, avoiding the pitying glances from townsfolk who whispered about poor Beatrice Larson and her doomed attempt to manage alone. $5 for the quilt, Mrs. Peterson offered, examining Beatrice's finest work with critical eyes. "It's worth 15 at least," Beatrice replied, standing her ground despite the woman's disapproving frown. 15 for something made by a girl who can't even keep a suitor? "I'm being generous at 5. Mrs. Peterson's words cut deep, but Beatrice maintained her composure, having armored herself against such barbs. She was preparing to negotiate further when a voice interrupted, deep and unfamiliar. "I'll pay 20 for that quilt," the stranger said, stepping forward with quiet confidence. The crowd parted as Zachary Jenkins approached, his presence commanding attention without apparent effort. He couldn't have been more than 26, tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes that reminded Beatrice of pine forests after rain. Unlike many cowboys passing through, he was clean-shaven save for the lightest shadow of stubble along his jaw, and his clothes, while practical, were notably well-kept. Mrs. Peterson huffed away as Zachary handed Beatrice the money, their fingers brushing briefly. "You don't need to overpay out of pity," Beatrice said, unable to stop herself. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "Ma'am, where I come from, we pay what something's worth. And that's fine craftsmanship." The exchange might have ended there, should have ended there, if not for the sudden commotion when Old Man Fletcher's horse broke free, charging directly toward a group of children playing nearby. Without hesitation, Zachary sprinted forward, placing himself between the panicked animal and the children. With practiced movements, he caught the reins, speaking low and steady until the horse calmed. The incident revealed something Beatrice hadn't expected, not the bravery, which was impressive but not uncommon on the frontier where quick reflexes often meant survival, but rather the gentleness. The way he soothed the frightened animal, how he knelt to reassure a crying child, the absence of bluster afterward when townspeople clapped his back. Beatrice was loading her remaining quilts into her wagon when Zachary approached again. "Miss Larson, is it?" he asked. "Folks say you run your homestead alone." "That's admirable." "Not according to most," she replied, securing her goods. "But I manage. I've been hired on at the Carson Ranch," he explained. "Just arrived last week from Wyoming. I wondered if your place might be on my route back." Beatrice hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse any assistance, but the long road home often proved dangerous. "The Carson place is south. My homestead lies northwest, near Pine Creek." Disappointment flickered across his features. "Different directions entirely." "Yes," she agreed, surprised by her own faint regret. Before they could exchange further words, Sheriff Wilson approached with urgent news. A prison wagon had overturned 10 miles east, and 3 dangerous criminals had escaped. Every able man was being recruited to join the search party. "Jenkins, we could use your tracking skills," the sheriff said. "Word is you ranged with the Army before coming here." "I'll join." Zachary agreed, then turned to Beatrice. Miss Larson, perhaps you should delay your journey home until they're captured. I can't afford to, she replied. The seeds need planting, and I've already lost too much time. His brow furrowed. Then please accept this. He withdrew a small revolver from his saddlebag. It's loaded and reliable. Keep it until I return for it. Beatrice almost refused, but recognized the practicality. Thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I'll return it when our paths cross again. Something unspoken passed between them in that moment, an understanding that they were more than just two strangers exchanging courtesies. For the first time in years, Beatrice felt a crack in the wall she had built around herself, and it terrified her. 3 days later, Beatrice was tending her small vegetable garden when hoofbeats approached her homestead. She reached for Zachary's revolver, poised at the edge of her porch, before recognizing him. Miss Larson, he called, dismounting. I've come to check on you, and to retrieve my firearm, if you're willing to part with it. Did you capture the escapees? She asked, lowering the weapon. 2 of them. The third headed north into the mountains. His gaze swept over her modest cabin and the struggling garden. You've done remarkable work here. Beatrice felt uncharacteristically self-conscious about the property's condition. It was my father's dream. I'm merely preserving it. Is it your dream too? Zachary asked, the question so direct that Beatrice found herself answering honestly. I don't know that I have dreams anymore, Mr. Jenkins. Just obligations. His expression softened. Everyone should have dreams, Miss Larson, even on the frontier. Before departing, Zachary noticed her struggling plow horse, an elderly animal clearly past its prime. Your field needs turning if you're to plant those seeds, he observed. Would you permit me to help? I have tomorrow free from the Carson Ranch. Every instinct told Beatrice to refuse. Accepting help meant creating a debt she couldn't repay, a dependence she couldn't afford. Yet the reality of her situation was undeniable. The field wouldn't plow itself, and her horse might not survive the effort. I can pay you, she offered stiffly. Not necessary, he replied, but I wouldn't say no to a meal afterward. And so began an unexpected arrangement. Zachary arrived the next morning with a strong draft horse borrowed from the Carson Ranch. Together they worked the field, and Beatrice found herself impressed by his efficiency and lack of condescension. Unlike other men who had occasionally helped her father, Zachary didn't offer unwanted advice or question her methods. He simply worked alongside her, respectful of her knowledge of her own land. Over a simple meal of rabbit stew, Beatrice learned that Zachary had lost his family to fever in Kansas 5 years earlier. He had been ranging ever since, working various ranches, never staying in one place for long. Why settle here? She asked. Cottonwood Creek is hardly promising. Perhaps I was tired of running, he replied, his gaze steady. Or perhaps I recognized something in this valley worth staying for. The weeks that followed brought an unexpected rhythm to Beatrice's solitary life. Zachary would appear every few days, always with some practical reason, bringing extra seed potatoes, helping repair her roof after a storm, offering news from town. She found herself looking forward to these visits despite her determination to remain self-sufficient. The townsfolk noticed. When Beatrice made her monthly trip for supplies, whispers followed her through the general store. Poor girl, setting herself up for heartbreak, Mrs. Peterson murmured to the shopkeeper. Cowboys never stay, especially the handsome ones. He's just being charitable, another woman added. Like taking in a stray cat. Beatrice pretended not to hear, but the words reinforced her deepest fears. She resolved to create more distance between herself and Zachary, convinced that whatever was developing between them could only end in disappointment. That resolution was tested when a violent spring storm struck without warning, bringing hail that threatened to destroy her newly planted crops. Zachary arrived in the midst of it, soaked to the skin, helping her frantically cover what they could with burlap and canvas. When the storm finally passed, they stood in mud-spattered exhaustion, surveying the damage. We saved most of it, he said, pushing wet hair from his forehead. The corn and beans should recover. You didn't have to come, Beatrice said, suddenly aware of how much she had begun to rely on him. You risked your life in that storm. I was worried about you, he admitted simply. The honesty in his voice cracked something inside her. Why? Why concern yourself with me at all? Is it pity? Or do you imagine I'll become so grateful Beatrice, he interrupted, The first time he'd used her given name. I come here because when I'm with you, I feel like I've found something I didn't know I was searching for. The confession hung between them, too raw and honest to dismiss. Beatrice felt tears threatening, not from sadness, but from the terrible vulnerability of hope. Everyone leaves, Zachary, she whispered, either by choice or by death. That's the truth of the frontier. Not everyone, he replied. Not always. Their first kiss came then, gentle and questioning, both of them mud-splattered and exhausted. It lasted only moments before Beatrice pulled away, frightened by how much she wanted to believe in the possibility he represented. You should go, she said, stepping back. Thank you for your help. For once, Zachary didn't respect her wishes. I'm not leaving you alone tonight. The creek might flood. I'll sleep in your barn if you prefer, but I'm staying. His concern wasn't unwarranted. By midnight, Pine Creek had indeed overflowed its banks, threatening to wash away her chicken coop. They worked side by side through the night, moving animals to higher ground, reinforcing the cabin's foundation with sandbags. By dawn, they had saved what mattered most, though the lower field was underwater. Exhausted, they sat on her porch as the sun rose, watching the floodwaters slowly recede. My father always said this land would break me, Beatrice confessed. Maybe he was right. Or maybe you weren't meant to face it alone, Zachary suggested. No one survives the frontier in isolation, Beatrice. Not the indigenous peoples, not the settlers, not anyone. We need each other. And what happens when those we need disappear? She challenged. We grieve. We continue. We find new connections. He took her hand. I know loss, Beatrice. I'm not promising forever because no one can. But I am promising today, and tomorrow, and every day after that I'm granted. For the first time in years, Beatrice allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where her homestead wasn't just a burden to bear alone, but a place where new dreams might take root. Their courtship unfolded through the practical rhythms of frontier life. Zachary continued working at the Carson Ranch, but spent every free moment at Beatrice's homestead. Together they repaired storm damage, replanted lost crops, and slowly, carefully built something neither had expected to find again: trust. By midsummer, the relationship had become common knowledge in Cottonwood Creek. Most approved, seeing it as the natural solution to Beatrice's untenable situation. A few, however, viewed it with suspicion. That Jenkins fellow isn't what he appears, Thomas Reynolds, the banker, remarked one afternoon as Beatrice collected her mail. A man that capable doesn't just drift into a backwater like this without reason. Mr. Jenkins's affairs are his own, Beatrice replied coolly, though the comment planted a seed of unease. That seed grew when she found Zachary studying an old map of the territory one evening, focusing on the area around her homestead. What are you looking for? She asked. He folded the map quickly. Just getting my bearings. This territory has changed hands so many times. The maps are often unreliable. The explanation seemed reasonable, yet something in his manner suggested evasion. For the first time since they'd met, Beatrice felt the chill of uncertainty. What did she truly know about Zachary Jenkins beyond what he had chosen to share? Her doubts multiplied when a stranger arrived in Cottonwood Creek asking about a man matching Zachary's description. The newcomer, who identified himself as a Pinkerton detective, left before Beatrice could question him, but his presence set the town buzzing with speculation. When confronted, Zachary dismissed the concerns. I've done nothing wrong, Beatrice. But like many who survived the war, I've left parts of my past behind that I prefer not to revisit. She wanted to believe him. Yet the detective's arrival coincided with subtle changes in Zachary's behavior. Heightened vigilance, secretive conversations with the sheriff, unexplained absences. Their relationship reached a crisis point in late July when Beatrice discovered a wanted poster in the sheriff's office while delivering eggs. The sketch bore a striking resemblance to Zachary, though the name listed was Daniel Morgan. The charges were serious: theft and murder during a bank robbery in Colorado. Heart-pounding, Beatrice confronted him that evening. Who are you really? She demanded, showing him the poster. Is everything between us built on lies? Pain flashed across his features. I am Zachary Jenkins now, he said quietly. The man on that poster no longer exists. So you admit it's you? The sketch, yes. The crimes, no. His hands trembled slightly. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. My business partner, the real Daniel Morgan, robbed that bank and killed a guard. I was waiting outside with the horses, believing we were there for a legitimate withdrawal. By the time I understood what had happened, it was too late. The witnesses saw two men fleeing. The law didn't care which one pulled the trigger. Why should I believe you? Beatrice asked, though she desperately wanted to. Because I could have disappeared again when that Pinkerton arrived. Instead, I stayed. For you. For us. For the life we've begun building. His expression was raw with emotion. I've been working with Sheriff Wilson to clear my name. The real Morgan was captured in Denver last month. Once his testimony arrives confirming my innocence, this ends. Beatrice wanted to believe him, needed to believe him, but fear won out. Until then, I think it's best you don't come here. I can't build my life with a man who might be taken away in chains tomorrow. The devastation on his face nearly broke her resolve, but Beatrice held firm. She had been right all along. Allowing herself to depend on someone else only invited heartbreak. Better to end it now before she lost everything. For 2 weeks, Zachary respected her wishes. Beatrice threw herself into work, ignoring the ache in her chest. She told herself it would pass, that she was stronger alone, that the frontier had no place for love stories. Then came the fire. A dry lightning strike ignited the forest northwest of her homestead, and within hours, a wall of flame was advancing toward her property. Beatrice worked frantically to create a firebreak, but the task was impossible for one person. As smoke choked the air and embers rained down, she faced the terrible choice of abandoning her home or risking death. She was loading her wagon with whatever valuables she could save when hoofbeats thundered up the path. Zachary appeared through the smoke, leading additional horses and accompanied by 3 men from the Carson ranch. "We need to go, Beatrice," he shouted over the roar of approaching fire. "Now, my home. We'll try to save it, but not at the cost of your life." Together with the ranchers, they created a hasty firebreak, soaking what they could with precious water from the well. Despite their efforts, it became clear the cabin couldn't be saved. The fire was moving too fast, driven by wind that shifted erratically. "We have to go," one of the ranchers urged. The road to town could be cut off any minute. As they prepared to flee, Beatrice suddenly realized her mother's locket, the only memento she had, was still in the cabin. Before anyone could stop her, she ran inside. The smoke was disorienting, the heat intense. She found the locket and turned to leave when a burning beam crashed down, blocking the door. Panic rose as she realized she was trapped. Then Zachary was there, wrapping her in a wet blanket and guiding her toward a window. Together they escaped as the roof began to collapse behind them. Safe distance from the inferno, Beatrice watched her home, her father's dream, her prison, her sanctuary, burn to ashes. Strangely, instead of despair, she felt an unexpected lightening. The homestead that had defined her existence was gone, yet she remained. "I'm sorry," Zachary said, holding her as they watched the flames. "I know what it meant to you." "It was just a place," she whispered, the truth of it surprising her. "Just wood and stone." They rode to Cottonwood Creek in silence, Beatrice processing her loss, Zachary clearly wanting to say more but respecting her space. The town had organized to fight the fire, which was now moving away from settled areas thanks to a providential shift in wind. At the sheriff's office, Beatrice was offered temporary lodging with the Reverend's family. As she prepared to go with them, Sheriff Wilson approached Zachary. "Jenkins, this arrived for you today." He handed over an official-looking envelope. "From the Colorado authorities." Zachary opened it with trembling hands, his eyes scanning the document. Relief washed over his features. "The charges have been dropped," he said, voice unsteady. "Morgan confessed that I had no knowledge of his plans. My name has been cleared." The timing seemed almost too perfect, as if the universe had conspired to strip away everything that defined their separate existences before offering a new beginning. That night, unable to sleep in the Reverend's spare room, Beatrice slipped out to the church steps. She was unsurprised when Zachary joined her a short time later. "How did you know I'd be here?" she asked. "I didn't," he admitted. "I couldn't sleep either. Too much happened today." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars emerge in the smoke-tinged sky. "I'm leaving the Carson ranch," Zachary finally said. "Mr. Carson offered me a herd of 30 cattle to start my own operation." Beatrice felt her heart sink. "So you're moving on after all?" No. He turned to face her fully. I've purchased land just south of town. Good grazing, plenty of water. Room to build. He paused. Room for a future, if you wanted to share it. Is this a proposal, Mr. Jenkins? Beatrice asked, her voice steadier than she felt. It is. Not because you need rescuing. You've proven how capable you are. Not because of the fire. I've wanted to ask for months. But because loving you has taught me that the frontier isn't just about survival. It's about building something worth surviving for. Beatrice thought of the years she'd spent convinced that independence meant isolation, that strength meant never needing anyone. She thought of her father's warning that she was wasting away, and realized he hadn't meant physically, but emotionally, walling herself off from the very connections that made survival meaningful. When I lost my family, Zachary continued, I believed I was being punished for some failing, that I didn't deserve happiness again. I wondered because I was afraid to plant roots that could be torn away. Then I met you, someone who understood that fear but faced each day anyway. Beatrice realized with startling clarity that they had been mirrors for each other, both wounded by the frontier's harsh lessons, both believing themselves unworthy of new beginnings. The town thinks I'm odd, she said softly. Too independent. Too stubborn. The town is wrong, Zachary replied. They don't see what I see. And what do you see? His smile was gentle. A woman who rebuilt her father's dream alone, who faces each challenge with quiet courage, who creates beauty through her quilts in a place that offers little beauty of its own. He took her hand. I see someone who is beautiful just as she is. The words unlocked something in Beatrice, a recognition that she had been waiting her entire life to be truly seen, not as a problem to be solved or a burden to be managed, but as herself, complete, worthy, enough. Yes, she said simply. I will marry you. Their wedding took place in October, after the harvest and the completion of their modest ranch house. The entire settlement attended, even Mrs. Peterson, who presented them with a surprisingly generous gift of fine china. Standing before the Reverend, Beatrice wore a blue dress she had sewn herself, with her mother's locket around her neck. Zachary, in a new suit, looked at her with such unguarded joy that she finally understood what he had been trying to tell her all along. That vulnerability wasn't weakness but the foundation of true strength. I take this man, she said when prompted, voice clear and confident, to love and cherish until death parts us. By the following spring, the Z&B Ranch, as the locals had taken to calling it, was thriving. Their cattle herd had grown, and the house had expanded to include a dedicated sewing room where Beatrice continued creating her quilts, now sought after by merchants as far away as Denver. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Zachary placed his hand over Beatrice's, which rested on her slightly rounded belly. Our child will never know the loneliness we did, he promised. Beatrice leaned against his shoulder, finally at peace with the frontier's harsh truths. Yes, everything could be lost in an instant. Yes, heartbreak and hardship were inevitable parts of life. But she no longer believed that meant love was foolish or connection was weakness. No, she agreed. Our child will know that survival isn't living, that independence doesn't mean isolation, and that the greatest strength comes from loving freely even in a world that offers no guarantees. The setting sun cast long shadows across their land, not just property now, but a home. A place where two people who had once believed themselves unworthy of happiness had discovered that love could indeed flourish on the frontier, not despite its hardships, but because of the courage those hardships demanded. And in that moment, Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as two broken souls hiding from pain, but as partners who had discovered that even in the wildest West, the heart's frontier could be tamed by those brave enough to try.